Ace Attorney 1 is a game about power. Other than the tutorial case, all of the murderers, and yes, I'm about to spoil every case in both Ace Attorney 1 and 2, and I'm also going to make some allusions to the themes and endings of all the other games, so I'm going to pause just long enough for you to click off here if you haven't played them. Other than the tutorial case, all of the murderers are people who thought that they were untouchable. Red White kills Mia for being a threat to his blackmail business, which he uses along with his vast wealth to control the police and local lawyers. Dee Vasquez pulls the strings in showbiz and uses her connections to the mafia to remove anyone who might get in her way. Manfred von Karma is a feared prosecutor who manipulates his victim's child to ensure there are no loose ends after he commits murder, and Damon Gant puppeteers both the police and the prosecutor's office, as well as using his official position at the top of the legal system to get away with his crimes. It's satisfying every time the game tells you that the odds are stacked against you and you manage to take one of these people down anyway, but it eventually ends up feeling shallow. Within Ace Attorney 1 itself, the theme works for maximum drama, but with 10 more games following up, it's hard not to notice that nothing really seems to be changing, despite the best efforts of our valiant defense attorneys. Ace Attorney has this problem where it has no issues at all with showing deeply unfair systems. Prosecutors can hide and forge evidence, murder trials are rushed through in 3 days and almost always result in the death penalty, and the police are incredibly incompetent when they're not out and out corrupt. But it's never able to tackle those big systems, because it always needs to end with a single dramatic villain who can have a big, showy breakdown animation. That leads to a kind of stagnation, with everything after the first trilogy floundering at least a little in its own premise. The investigation spin-offs take shots at the prison system and again the corruption of the prosecutor's office, but they still end with Edgeworth deciding he can work within that system despite its obvious rot. Apollo Justice opens on the idea that everything's gotten worse in the last 7 years, but at least there are attempts to reform the justice system going on, and then Ace Attorney 5 acts like that never happened. Ace Attorney 6 tries to sidestep the problem by going to a different country, which just leads to Phoenix seeming deeply hypocritical at best and weirdly imperialist at worst. And then they still preserve the monarchy at the end of it, because come on now, surely those have never caused an issue for anyone. And don't even get me started on how the end of Great Ace Attorney 2 completely undermines everything it's set up to that point. To a degree, I think this was always going to be a problem for Ace Attorney. As well as needing that boss battle feeling, it's sort of built on the idea of being one man against this big system, so if they ever fixed those systems, the whole concept would kind of fall apart. But there was a moment when they at least managed to postpone that issue. Ace Attorney 2 is a game about power. Again, leaving out the tutorial case for now, our killers are noticeably different from the first game. Morgan Fay and Mimi Meany collaborate to kill Dr. Gray, Morgan motivated by wanting power that she doesn't have, and Mimi trying to retain the shred of autonomy she's created for herself after her life entirely fell apart. Acro is driven by revenge for the accident that cost him his job and his family, and even then his crime ends up being out of his control. These are 3 people who are disempowered and kill because of it. On its face, the final case, Farewell My Turnabout, returns more straightforwardly to the themes of Ace Attorney 1. Like White, Vasquez, von Karma, and Gant, On Guard thinks that he's untouchable, but it reverses the roles, not only because he's Phoenix's client, but because he's trying to blackmail him directly. It asks the player whether they will cede in the face of power, and if they do, they get a bad ending. And also unlike Ace Attorney 1, it subverts the idea of the law being able to topple those at the top of the food chain, because On Guard is eventually taken down simply by not being the biggest fish in the room. I've left out the tutorials until now because they actually work as a pretty neat comparison to one another. You can't really argue that Frank Saw is some kind of kingpin, but then he's never played up as much of a problem. He's just here to teach you the ropes. And the same is true of Richard Wellington, but he really wishes he had power. He's just a low-level conman, but he acts like the most important person in the room. Saw is a stepping stone to the rest of the game. Wellington is a stepping stone who knows that's what he is. This shift in focus towards the disempowered makes Justice for All relatively unique among the near dozen Ace Attorney sequels. It allows the game to be rooted in the same 1v1 drama as the first game, but it makes it more personal. It offers a different perspective on the ways power influences people, but it brings it down to a more grounded level. And these personal stakes are the mode where Ace Attorney can operate most freely. Although its world building is fascinating, it regularly ties itself up in it, unable or unwilling to really explore how justice works and doesn't work in its fictional courts and by extension the real world. I don't know what the solution is for this problem that the series has dug itself into. I kind of suspect, even though this is wild to say as someone who's been waiting for Ace Attorney 7 for nearly a decade, that the answer was stopping a while ago. But at least Ace Attorney 2 avoids the problem by flipping the script so neatly established in the first game. Thanks so much for watching. I wrote this script basically all in one go in the middle of editing an episode of the Ace Attorney podcast that I make with my friends, Turnabout Breakdown. So if you're interested in me spending way too much time thinking about these games, which turns into this kind of essay, you can check out the link in the description. I've got to get back to editing now.